Hey, money nerds. I wanted to treat today's episode a little bit differently. So here's what I'm thinking. I wanted to almost give you this sense of if you were my best friend and you came to me and you said, Whitney, I'm really struggling. I don't know what's going on in my finances. I feel lost. I feel overwhelmed. Can you please help? This is kind of what I would go through if I was your BFF. And of course, I'm going to do this. If I was your best friend, I'd be a little bit more unfiltered, a little bit more straightforward and direct sometimes. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So this episode is going to be helpful if you are just looking for a little bit of a pep talk and you're kind of tired of going through the same motions and you want to fix it for good. That's what we're going to be covering today. I've got my notes, so let's go ahead and dive in. The first thing I would ask you, if you were my BFF, is I would say, why are you unhappy? Like, what about your finances is currently making you feel like it's not good enough? And truly, I would say, okay, so if you are feeling not good enough because of your income, okay, that's one thing. If it's because you feel like you don't know what's going on, you feel out of control, that's another thing. If you're unhappy because you and your partner can't get on the same page, that's an entirely different thing too, right? So I would first ask, why are you unhappy? And if you're experiencing any regret, I would reframe it. I heard this on the Mel Robbins podcast, and I thought this was great. It was essentially talking about reframing regret as not a negative thing, although we all have it. It's a teacher. Regret is something that's trying to teach us or educate us in some way. And I really like that because I thought so many of us do have regrets and we feel bad about it, but we don't know how to get through it. We dwell on it. We constantly relive it instead of saying, what is this trying to teach me and how can I learn from this so that I can continually move forward in a healthy, positive way? So I thought that was kind of interesting. So that's the first thing I would ask. Why are you unhappy? What areas? The second thing I would ask is truly, what matters most to you? And this is going to be unique because every person is so different and so on different pages, different seasons of life. Like we all have different life circumstances. But I would ask my friend, hey, girl, what matters most to you truly? Is it spending more time so that you can travel? Is it having more financial stability so that you can breathe a little bit more and you don't have to constantly be worried about, is this the time where my finances are going to just go downhill even faster? Is this a month where I'm going to have the extra tires that have to be changed and I can't afford it and I take out more debt? I would really, really get into what matters most to you. And this is a tough one because so many people don't even really know. So what I would suggest, if you don't even know what matters most to you, is I want you to go through this whole like concept of the perfect day exercise. This one is something I've done quite a bit over the years, and it does change because my life is completely different now versus even when I first started this podcast years ago. So what the perfect day exercise looks like is I would say, okay, what time do you wake up in the morning? How do you wake up? Do you wake up naturally and on your own? Do you wake up by an alarm clock? Do you wake up because your kids' little feet are pitter-pattering on the floor and you can hear them and they're coming to wake you up? What is the terms in which you even wake up and what time? How do you feel? Okay, then what do you do first in the morning? And when I went through this exercise too, and I started to really understand that my perfect day, when I pared it down day by day, every single day, like hour by hour, what I learned is that my normal day was really not that far off from my quote unquote perfect day. And I thought it was great because it kind of really took that pressure off of feeling like I have to make these like grandiose changes in my life for me to feel good about it. It was the small little things. It was maybe waking up 30 minutes before my kiddo so I can have a cup of coffee on my patio and listen to the birds. It was being able to read in the evenings with half a glass of wine on the couch instead of watching Netflix. It was these really small shifts. It was even like down to like, what do I do for work? It was all of that kind of stuff really came up and really illustrated that my perfect life was not too far away. At the end of the day, the things that I was chasing and actively thought would make me happy, the bigger house, the nicer car, that kind of stuff, it didn't really matter as much as I thought it would have when I looked at the perfect day. So when you start to live in that realm of possibility for yourself, when you start to look at day by day instead of like event by event, what I mean by that is instead of living for the big things, the marriage, the vacation, the retirement, the when you buy that property, when you are able to hit a certain net worth, when you stop taking those big life events, those big milestones out of the picture, then you start to realize that it's the day-to-day that matters most, truly. And so I would ask my friend, okay, go through that exercise. What came up for you? What were your takeaways? What did your perfect day look like? And then I would say, okay, did you notice that it wasn't having the latest and greatest? It wasn't filling that emotional void by buying crap you don't need. It wasn't having a cluttered garage full of things that you have to get rid of because you overconsumed and you bought so much stuff and now you don't even understand what's in your garage and you have to declutter all of that stuff out. Most of us, it doesn't really come down to material stuff. It's who you spend time with, what you do for work, and how you spend your free time. And it's how do you feel as a whole. Like, that's it. That's what's going to make us happy for most of us. It's not the grandiose stuff. The grandiose stuff, those big events are fun and exciting, but that's not what we really live for. At least I hope that is true, because if we only live for the big stuff, then we're going to be really disappointed, right? We're going to have that constant deferred life plan. So that's the second thing I would ask somebody. And I don't recall which podcast I heard this on, but I thought this was a great point as well. I was talking about discipline and how it's so much easier to be disciplined when you know directly what you want and what's important to you. And let's put it this way. So a lot of people rely on willpower for discipline. I'm not a fan of this. I think that can get you started. It can get you going, but it's not going to be the thing that like really drives you and gets you to stick to your goals long term. Willpower is not enough. You will fall to the level of your systems every single time. And so what I mean by that is if your goal is to get financial stability, that's an important piece for you and your family, then what you're going to be focusing on is you're going to be focusing on how do I automate savings and investing, and maybe even 529 contributions if you're to that stage in your finances. It's constantly looking at how you can automate so that you're taking the guesswork, you're taking willpower out of the equation. So that willpower will get you going, but it's not going to get you completely to the finish line. That's what the systems will do. That's the automations. That's your budget. That's your financial plan. That's what gets you to that finish line. But in this podcast, it talked about discipline. And it said that discipline is saying no to what you want today so that you can say yes to what you want most. And I thought that was a really good reframe. So instead of feeling rigid and boring and like, oh, not so fun discipline stuff, when we think about discipline as just a simple act of trade-offs and of saying, I want this more than this, it helps put things into perspective. It's really, really easy to say no to something that's not going to serve you today if you know for sure it's getting you closer to your dream life. Now, after I get clear on those things, notice we're not even talking about money yet. With my BFF, we're just sipping coffee and just talking about life in general first. Now is where we're going to turn, now that I have some direction and I understand here's what's important, here's what you want, here's why that's important to you. What I can do now is I can say, okay, let's look at your cash flow. Let's do a really deep dive on cash flow analysis. And if you've been around this podcast for any number of episodes, you have probably picked up on the fact that I absolutely love digging into this manually in the beginning of your finances. And the reason why I like this so much to really like dig into the nitty gritty manually is because what I find for so many of us, when we are looking at apps or aggregations or just basic summaries of our data, we don't really connect to that much. But when we go through what I call the bank statement exercise, we see this and we connect. It really makes a big difference. We start to really, truly understand exactly what's going on with our finances. So what this looks like is I would have my friend print off the past 30 days of transactions for their credit card and checking account. Now, if they have multiple credit cards, I'd say, print it all off, girl. Let's bring it over. Let's see what we got. And then from there, I would have 3 different colored highlighters, a calculator, and a pen or pencil. And I would say, okay, what are 3 categories that you tend to overspend on or you just really don't know? And so they would probably say something to the tune of shopping in some capacity. Maybe it's Amazon. Maybe it's just going to the mall. What I would immediately do is I would go through those transactions with my friend and I would say, okay, how much are we spending on eating out? How much are we spending on shopping? How much are we spending on groceries each month? I would start to highlight each of these transactions and then we would summarize it up together. And when we do this, what happens is we are forced to take accountability. it's very hard to separate yourself. Something in your brain triggers when you do this. I promise. I see it so often where when you're going through this exercise, something triggers for you where you have to understand that you are responsible for how many times you swiped your card. Nobody else. It's you. And that's good and it's bad. And sometimes it's depressing. And sometimes it's like, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought. It really just depends on where you're at with your finances. Once you have all of that done and you have everything tallied up, you can see a good picture of where your money's actually going. Now, the second thing I would say is when I do this exercise with people, and if I did this with my BFF, this would for sure come up. It would come up where it's like, well, I don't always spend. If this was a weird month, last month was kind of weird. We were traveling or we had a holiday or it was a birthday or I had family in town. It wasn't a normal month. And I've done this enough to know that we often, most of the time, don't have normal months. We will find something to say like, oh, that's not typical, even though every month something untypical seems to come up. We might have like a couple of months per year that are normal and boring, and that's great. But most of the time we have things that do come up. And so I would say, let's just like jot that down, use it as data points just to understand where your money's going. Let's not judge it. Let's not make it anything more than what it is. And let's figure out exactly what we can do to get control of it. When you have those numbers, I would then ask my friend, hey girl, what do you feel about these numbers? How are you feeling? Is it too much, too high, too low? Like what's coming up for you? And usually people will say, feels like I'm spending way too much on eating out. I don't like that I have nothing to show for this. It's not really something that brings me that much joy. I like eating out in the moment, but bigger picture, that discipline. Remember, saying no to things that you want today for the bigger picture. That's when we can start to create parameters or boundaries around your spending. And this is in a healthy way. Boundaries are always healthy. It's never a bad thing. Boundaries are protecting you from other people sabotaging your budget, from you sabotaging your budget. It's just that simple protection mechanism that we put in place to help us with our cash flow. When we have that, then I would start to understand more of a picture of where their money's going, what their income is, what their outgo is, and we can start to create a good budget based off of that. When we have that budget created, it's essentially just income, expenses, and then tracking when you pay certain things and tallying up how much you're spending so you know how much you have left in your categories to spend. That's really all it is. You can make a budget very complicated. You can make it very simple. You can even say you don't live on a budget, but you still kind of do at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we all have some type of budget. So putting it on paper feels like, oh man, now I got to stick with it. You have free will. You have choice, but your choices are probably not something you're happy with. That's why my friend said, hey, can you help me with my finances? So if you're not happy with your choices, that means we really do have to do things kind of different. And it's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you can do it. And I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to do it together. So once we have that budget created and it's a plan that you feel good about, then we can start to shift into how do we make our money work for us? That's the automation piece. I would first start with, can we afford to automate things, or is it a little bit too soon? For some people, we get really excited, kind of gung-ho. We're like, all right, I'm going to automate everything. I'm going to put this much towards my investing, this much towards my debt, this much towards my savings and my sinking funds. And we get all of this money automated without actually the practice of tracking our spending and understanding intimately where our money is going. And then what happens is we oversave and then we borrow from our savings. And then we feel guilty about it. And we are mean to ourselves and we talk bad about ourselves and we say horrible things and we do the same thing over and over again, but we're expecting a different result. And at the end of the day, if you zoom back a little bit, the obvious thing here is we haven't trained ourselves to live on a reduced income or a reduced amount yet. Now, that's why a lot of times those savings don't necessarily work in the beginning. But the minimums that I would start to automate is your investing. If you are in your 30s, if you are in your 40s, you cannot afford to not do this. You need to invest something. I don't care if that means you don't go out to eat for a couple of months while you start to invest more money. You are worth it. And I promise you, when you look back on your life later, that will be a huge regret if you don't do that today. Because you're not going to remember all the times you went out to eat Panda Express and bought orange chicken and chow mein, guilty as charged. You're not going to remember that. You will look back and you will say, oh, you know what? I'm glad that I was able to find some money in my budget to put this towards investing, because now my net worth is growing. I have a exciting amount of money invested, and I'm going to be able to walk away from work at 50 years old instead of 65. And that feels great. I'm really, really glad I did that. Notice how a lot of self-care is not doing the things that are fun. It's doing the things that are good for us long term. It's going to the gym when we know we don't want to, but like that physical benefit is so important. It's eating healthier. It's drinking your dang water. It's all of the things that will be good for us, that we know are good for us, are the things that don't feel great in the moment. And that's where that discipline part comes from. If you have a clear vision, you know what you want to accomplish with your life, you know exactly where you're headed, it's very easy to say no to some of those trade-offs. So that's what I'm talking about here when I start to create a budget and I say don't put too much into savings too soon, or don't automate too much yet. Give yourself like a month of just tracking and paying attention before you set up those automations outside of your investment contributions. Then once we have that, I would tell my friend, you need to check in with your finances every single week. Same time, same day, every week. Get accountability. Call me and tell me, hey, I'm checking in on my finances today. I'm doing this right now. Can you text me at whatever 6:30 p.m. to make sure that I actually did it? Yes, that's accountability. And then if you're the accountability buddy, which would be me, I would say, yes, I will do that. And I will actually go check in to make sure that you did the work. So that's how this would be in practice. And what you're doing on those check-ins is you're just kind of doing like a little bit of a check-in to see, did anything come up that's different about this month? Was there anything we didn't plan for that now we need to? So maybe it was the car tires this month and you need to save a little bit of money towards that. So what are we going to reduce, or what are we going to trade off from our numbers? Because we all have limited income. We all have a fixed amount. You have to work within your parameters. We can't just like magically come up with money. If you can, let me know. That'd be really cool to see. But generally speaking, for most of us, when we are living on our normal income, we have to live within certain constraints. So if something comes up, that means that we have to reduce another category or pull from somewhere else in order to fund something different. This is not rocket science. We all get this. This is just basic trade-offs. But at the end of the day, I would say that's what you're doing during your money date. You're checking in with your finances, seeing if anything's changed. You're adding up how much you spent for the week. And then you are making sure that you are feeling good about your progress. And if you're not, we have time in the month to really reconfigure some things so that we can get back on track. So that is what we would be doing. And then lastly, what I would tell my friend is that you have to understand what season of life you're in. If you have a new baby, maybe you have a 1-year-old, you are very likely not going to be in a season of hustle. You might be, but you probably won't be. You're most likely going to be in a season where you have to be a little bit more mindful of your time, of how you're spending your time. You probably are still going through hormonal changes, and you're probably still going through understanding a new identity and maybe getting back into work. So this isn't really the time to throw your baby in the car seat and go do Uber Eats. You could for sure, but that's likely not the season that you're in. And a lot of times what we don't understand is we don't really understand what season we're in, and we get kind of frustrated and we get into this like comparison syndrome. And that's where a lot of this stuff really comes from, where we start to get upset. And so I would tell my friend, what season are you in? And then also, if you are in a season where you're trying to pay off debt, now would not be the time to start a new business necessarily. Now, hear me out. It could be. It really could be. What I have seen with most businesses, specifically online businesses, is a lot of times that temptation to go buy a course, to go buy new things, to try to learn this new side hustle, and then get started is very strong. And so what I see for a lot of people is it actually puts them more into debt. And then they're trying, they're hustling, they're doing the work, but business is hard. Most businesses fail. They are not easy to get off the ground. And they usually take a lot of time and a lot of money to get off the ground at the end of the day. So when you're starting to think about that business idea, I would say, you know what, if your goal is to pay off debt, to clean up some money so that you have money to invest in things like a business, that's completely okay. But this season is not prioritizing passive income right now. We need to prioritize the hustle, the active income, because that's what's going to actually move the needle. That's what's going to push that rock up the hill, so to speak. When you're trying to pay off debt or you're trying to fix your situation, oftentimes that is a season of grit. Now, I say a season very intentionally. A season is not a lifetime. Okay. We should not be in a season for longer than even a year or two. That's even a long season, I think, in my opinion. But if we are trying to pay off debt, we might do 3 months or 4 months of extreme hustle where you are doing the Uber Eats, you are doing the things that long term would fully burn you out, no doubt about it. But you might be doing that for a time period to get this stuff cleaned up so that you feel better about your progress and you have money to make progress. Now, that is what I would tell my friend. And I would say, let's touch base. Let's follow this plan for 6 to 12 months. What you're doing is currently not working. If you're happy with it, you wouldn't have reached out. So let's fix it. And the only way to fix this is to get a good plan in place, what we talked about today, and really stick with it as best as you possibly can. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be shitty and you're not going to enjoy every step of it. And you know what? You're going to get through this and you're going to look back and you're going to be so damn glad that you did it, because that hard work and that sacrifice is what's going to make you feel like you can accomplish anything with your finances. I really believe that, and I really want that for you too. All right. I hope this episode was helpful. I hope it was like a little pep talk if you're kind of in this situation and you're trying to figure out what's next in your life and how do you fix it. I hope that this was helpful. That is it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me for this kind of casual pep talk. I appreciate it. I'll see you next week for another episode of the Money Nerds podcast. Bye.